Oh my. It's Money in the Bible. Hello, everybody. This is Wade Wacker with Reasons for Hope, and this week's talk is on God's economic playbook. And boy, do I wish I could use his playbook for trying to get this stimulus package paperwork all done. Started the process March 30th for many companies that I work with, and the rules change about every 6 hours. So we've been frantically trying to get as many businesses applied and accepted and money in. We've done 8. We've got 1 down. So it's been a stressful day today. They changed. Do 1099 people, can they get accepted? How do you do LLCs and partnerships? How do you do sole proprietors? Is the EIDL 1,000 a person, or is it up to 10? And yada, da, 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 da. So been an interesting couple weeks trying to get all that stuff done. So hopefully we can get that stimulus package rolling to these small businesses and we can help. All right, today's talk. Oh, first of all, I want to congratulate a viewer. They did guess the correct announcer for the first show. Nobody's guessed the second show in the beginning who that announcer was, but I did have somebody guess Brent Musburger on the first show. So congratulations. If you are watching, I still need your email me the address and stuff. I can send you a t-shirt and some goodies here. So thanks for guessing. Appreciate he actually had a great dialogue between each other on some of the points that I agreed with him on quite greatly. So anyway, thanks for the feedback. Looking forward to it. All right, let's get started. We're going to talk today about God's economic playbook. Now, first, I do want to talk a little bit about God's instructions to the poor, and then God's instructions to the lazy. And there's a fine line. So God is very direct. There's over 2,000 verses when you talk about poverty and justice in the Bible. And when he gives commands, he ain't messing around when he talks about how we should treat the poor. The book of Proverbs has 17 direct messages about treating the poor kindly. And they're direct. They are hit ya. Here it is. This is the way we want it. God said it. Let's do it. So here's 5 of them. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. A generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water. You give bad, you get bad. Proverbs 14:21. Those who despise their neighbors are sinners, but happy are those who are kind to the poor. Proverbs 14:31. One thing on that verse, verse 8, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Let me repeat that. And is worse than an unbeliever. That is meaning God is saying if you're capable, you need to get it done. You need to do. You can't not do, you have to do. That's a pretty whoa type comment. Proverbs 10:4. He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Repeats it. The next verse, 10:5. He who gathers in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame. Repeat. Whenever the Bible repeats, it means business. It always means business, but it really means business when it repeats. Proverbs 19:17. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. God gave us instinct. God gave us the ability to work. We are to work. And lastly, Proverbs 12:24. The hand of the diligent will rule, but the lazy man will be forced to labor. You're going to be lazy. You're going to end up being, you are going to have to be forced to labor. That's what's going to happen. You can't be lazy forever. So let's talk about God's playbook. Okay, we're going to talk about 2 specific things today. We're going to talk about first fruits or tithing, and then we're going to talk about God's harvest plan. And the difference between, or just and the significance of each. So let's talk about first fruits first. Now, as some of you know, when you start going into some of these studies, boy, you can get led down a lot of different paths. And when I started going down the path of the word first fruits, say that 10 times as fast as you can, by the way, you can go down. I could not believe how many times first fruits was used in this Bible. It is amazing when you start counting up all the different verses that involved first fruits. And actually, what started happening is first fruits was used a lot, especially in talking about the first fruits were raised. So I started, when you start going down that eschatology road, oh boy, that can lead you to a lot of different things. So yes, I started going down that road. It's so enticing, isn't it? But anyway, so I tried to get back on track. So first fruits, what we're going to talk about first fruits today is tithing and what the definition for first fruits means and to give. So let's go to Nehemiah 10, verse 35 first. We obligate ourselves to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all the fruit of every tree year by year to the house of the Lord, expecting our best. He wants our best. He wants us to want to give our best. That's what he's saying in Nehemiah 10:35. Proverbs 3:9. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Same thing that Nehemiah 10:10. He wants your best. Your best is good enough. He wants it. And more importantly, he wants you to want to give your best. Romans 8:23. Now the first two were direct commands on what we should do with first fruits. Romans 8:23 gives us what the Spirit is giving in return. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, grown inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. We are getting first fruits from the Holy Spirit. That's what we're getting. And this is what I talked about last week. Eagerly for adoption as sons. We're the heirs. Remember last week I talked about joint heirs. We're getting everything they have. We're getting their first fruits. So we need to have the attitude to give our first fruits when we give it to the Lord. So I'm going to take you back to the story of Cain and Abel. Let's go back to Genesis. And let's talk about first fruit when we look at that story. And the question at hand is, did Cain bring first fruit? Okay, I think we're all going to know the answer because we know how the story ended. Genesis 4, chapter 1 through 7. Let's read it. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel, I'm going to stop right there. Okay, let's critically think that sentence. Okay, or that verse. Let's critically think that. Let's go back. And she conceived and bore Cain. So we know Cain was born first. First sons have some rights. They have a lot of rights, especially back then. But notice the two words, conceived and bore. Okay? So she was conceived, then she gave birth to Cain. Now let's advance to Abel. Let's go over to Abel and says, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Here is my critically thinking moment. Moses used the word conceived and bore for Cain. He did not for Abel. Therefore, I believe they're twins. So, interesting fact, when you critically think that sentence, I think that sentence is telling us they're twins. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep. Abel had the livestock. But Cain was a tiller of the ground. He had the grain. And in the process of it, time came past that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Okay? So at some point in time, the Lord told Cain and Abel, hey, I need my respect. Abel also brought of the firstborn of the flock and of their fat. Now let's critically think that verse, or those two verses. So let's go back. And in the process of it came past that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Notice the word used, an. He brought nothing special. He brought something. Now let's fast forward to Abel. Abel brought the firstborn of their fat. Good, healthy. He brought his best. So when you look at that sentence, it's very apparent Cain just brought something. Probably scraps. Where Abel brought his best. Key to that point. Because, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry and his countenance fell. Cain was mad. What? I brought you something. It's good enough. You don't need my best. What do you mean? What do you mean? God said. What do you mean? What do you mean that we're supposed to do this in today's world? God didn't mean that. God was the king of, I know what you meant, but I know what you wrote, but let me tell you what you meant. That's what Cain's saying right there. So Let's go to the next verse, verse 6. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and it is desire for you, but you should rule over it. So, what God is saying is here, hey, whoa, time out. Why are you mad? You knew what was supposed to be done. You knew what I've provided. And you came to me with this? You came to me with this, and you're angry that I'm angry. Huh? Or I didn't respect it. So, interesting, in verse 7, God goes to grace here. God says, hey, if you do well, I'll accept it. Now, he kind of puts it sarcastically. Well, will you not be accepted? Of course you're going to be accepted if you do well. So God gives Cain grace. Hey, come on now. If you can do this, give me your best, hey, you'll be respected. As we know, as the story goes, Cain doesn't. Ends up getting jealous, ends up killing Abel, and the rest is history, as they say. So that story tells us and teaches us a great story of what we're supposed to bring to the Lord. These are God's resources. We need to bring our best. So, a question that we get off, now let's go to tithe. The question that we get a lot in the ministry, or a lot of people in ministry get, is how much am I supposed to tithe? Okay, fun fact. Tithe in Hebrew means tenth. That's where the 10% comes in. In the Old Testament system is 10%. God specifically gave good instructions that you were to give 10% of what you made, of your crop or of your stock or whatever. You're supposed to give 10%. However, in the New Testament, it does not give those specifics. It does not give, hey, this is the number. Instead, the New Testament, hey, this is on your heart. This is your attitude. The key to tithing, people, is that you must understand God's ownership. If you understand that in your heart and you fully believe that everything you have is God's resource, it's his blessings. Each breath is a blessing. I should be able to tithe my day by making him happy with the way I conduct myself as a Christian, because every breath was his, and he's given me another one. So we must understand that tithe is a testament of God's ownership, every resource that we have. If we do that, then we will give with a good attitude. Attitude is key when we give. God knows our heart. God knows our attitude. If we're doing it because we have to, or if we're doing it because we want to, there is a big difference. Let's go to Luke 21, verse 1 through 4. Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box, and he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. Jesus knew this widow did not have much. But she gave because she knew. She knew the true resource, that these resources were his. That's attitude. That's what Jesus is looking for. I love that attitude. I love that verse. Joyful heart. Then are you doing it joyfully? Are you going, yes, I can't wait to give these resources that the Lord blessed me with back to him, back to the church so they can do good, back to the ministry so they can get out and get people to this great blessing. Are you doing it with a joyful heart? 2 Corinthians 9:7, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Give joyfully, give with a good attitude. That is the instruction in the New Testament and in the tithe. There is not a specific amount. Some people can't give money. Some people have to give time. Some people have to give prayer. God knows. God knows what you can and you can't do. But he does want you to tithe. All right. Now, let's go on to the harvest plan. Okay? This is an interesting study that I'm going to share with you on the way I understand the instructions God put before us to build an economic plan. So here's the economic playbook. And yes, I do strongly believe that he gives us specific instructions on how we should develop an economy. Let's go to Leviticus. All right, let's go to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 10. You shall not strip your vineyard bare or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. Okay? You grow. But he's saying there is a certain percentage you should not harvest. You should leave. Okay? And notice who he says to leave them to. He says the poor and the alien. Who in the world's the alien? Okay? If you go back to the Hebrew and you look up alien, alien is not a natural born community member. It is an outsider. Some translations use the word stranger. So the Lord's instructing us, leave to the poor and to a stranger. My interpretation of alien in today's world is government. Leviticus 23, verse 22. This one is big. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the alien. I am the Lord your God. Repeats, you shall leave them for the poor and for the alien, verbatim to we did it in chapter 19, verse 10. Verbatim. But notice the instructions. And this is where my math mind goes sometimes when I read the Bible, and I can really get to formulas. When Daniel was going to rest on his side, etc. Boy, those are good formulas to work on. But here's a math. Here's my calculus going to work. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap the very edges of your field. So let me explain where I went with this. Let's take a square. Let's take a field. We're gonna harvest. We're gonna combine a square. Okay? But how we're gonna combine? We're gonna combine in a circle. For any of those of you who've been in Nebraska, if you go to a cornfield, you'll see that they irrigate in circular patterns. So we're going to harvest in a circular pattern. So what I want to do is I want to listen to the Lord, and I want to say, we're going to leave the corners. Okay? So the gray area we're going to leave. So how do we figure out what percent that is? Let's go to good old algebra. Let's go to A equals R squared for the area of a square, and let's go to A equals pi R squared, the area of a circle. Let's minus the square of the circle, and let's get what percentage. And it just gives me goosebumps when I think of what the Lord was teaching us. So what we find out is that each area has 5.375% to be left to the poor and the alien. You add up those numbers. Well, first of all, the area of the circle is 78.5%. So you keep 78.5%, and 21.5% is left for the poor and the alien. I believe that God is telling us what a good economy should run on as far as the amount of revenue to the government. I think that's a strong inference of what the Lord was trying to teach us. And I have some stats to back that up. What does it take to run a government? If you plug that into Google, you will see that it generally takes anywhere between 18 to 22% of the federal budget, of the income tax, to run the government. Now, there's other revenue factors, I understand, but generally speaking, economies that have a federal income tax rate in between 18 to 22% are to be in that comfort zone. If taxes get more, you curb growth. If taxes get less, you start separating classes. History has shown when our tax bracket or our tax revenue is in that 18 to 22% range, it works very well. Light bulb. So when I looked at that stat versus what the Lord was teaching us, it was an aha moment. It was like, wow. Another couple interesting things that for those governments there's a lot of governments over in Europe that have gone to the flat tax. We're just going to charge a flat tax, try to get away from some of the fraud and all the different, they take all deductions away and say, look, we're going to charge, here's the flat tax, everybody's paying this amount, we move on. And that percent, what they say is ideal, is anywhere between 18 to 24. Another thing that's being talked about a lot is the national sales tax. Trying to figure out where that should be if we go to a national sales tax. I personally really like that idea because you take away a lot of the fraud, and if you spend more, you pay more. If you spend less, you pay less. I think it's the fairest system out there. Yes, there's a lot of variables that go into it, so I'm not going to say, I truly want to go that route. But I like the concept of that one, don't know how it would work. Actually, I like that concept the best, but it scares me how they would track how much tax that you paid. Because the reason why that scares me is, say it with me, how would they track it? Mark of the beast. So I love the concept, but I don't know where that would go from a standpoint of the mark of the beast. Anyway, I digress. So when you look at that, I believe God gave us a very, very, very good instruction book on how that revenue should go to the economy. Now, key question, who should take care of the poor? We could debate this. We could just have a talk on this, on who we think should take care of the poor. 8% of the federal budget of the United States government is for welfare, is for the poor. And we all know how that's managed, not very well. So the question is, should nonprofits or should the government? My personal opinion is I think we need to do a better job as nonprofits of taking care of the poor. We need to have a better system in place for these nonprofits. I have a problem with nonprofits who have their people running them making a couple million a year. I do not think that's right. There are people who run nonprofits that are worth a lot of money. I agree with that, but anything over 2 million, even over 1 million in my world is just, I don't think that's the premise of what a nonprofit is. But again, who should take care of the poor? That's a great debate to have. I personally don't think the government can run anything very well, and when it's not your own, you just don't. You can't blame them. Oh yeah, you can. We can, but when it's not your own and you have all the bureaucracy, it's just tough. It's just like the stimulus package. What was supposed to be a simple, hey, I'm in business, here's my revenues, here's my expenses, can I get a loan, has turned into, a nightmare. So I believe nonprofits should take care of the poor, and we have to create a better system for nonprofits to do that. I think we would. I think we would do a much better job, but we need to create that environment to make it easier. So, all right, to close, I'm going to say this. We must remember that these assets, the ownership of the assets, and they're not ours, they're the Lord's. These resources are blessed upon us because of God's blessing. And when we understand that, as I had stated before, we can then give with a great attitude. We can give with a joyful heart. The key is understanding that. Also, let's understand that in order for an economic system to work, Jesus said, let Caesars be Caesars. In order for a good economic system to work, there must be revenue, there must be pieces left to somebody to run. Our government is needed. Fortunately, in America, we have a say of how it can be run. Now, we need to have much more of a say and get this running better. But the fact of the matter is God does instruct us that there has to be an amount given so we can have the security, we can have the roads, we can have etc. So that's my God's economic game plan. I look forward to seeing you next week. I do not have a topic for next week. I need some help. So if somebody can put a topic they would like to talk to me about, or I can do some study on for you, I would gladly do it. A lot of different areas I can go, but I don't have a specific one for next week. But I do look forward to seeing you next week. Please put in the comments. Please hit the subscribe button. We need more subscribers. And watch the shows every day. We've got them going on during this quarantine every single day. 3 times a day we've got content going up on the web pages, either Facebook or YouTube. Get on them, find them. God bless you. We ask you to continue to pray for our leaders, our president, our governors, our representatives, and the healthcare people and the people who are working on the front lines for this. Let's pray for them, and let's pray to find a cure for this virus so we can move on as a country. God bless, and look forward to seeing you next week.